That was shocking new video showing two prominent opposition leaders being dragged away to prison after being seized from their homes in the middle of the night by state security agents. This comes just days after an illegitimate election ignites deadly protests and yields more power to the dictatorship rule of Nicolas Maduro, who is now one of just 4 heads of state personally sanctioned by President Donald Trump. Joining me now to discuss America's stake in this story is one of Maduro's most ardent opponents, a man who just delivered a speech on Venezuelan TV, Florida Senator Marco Rubio. Senator, thank you for joining me. I know that this is not a new issue to you. You've been covering it for a while, and I wonder if you could explain to people what is happening there and why you decided to be the American that stood up and gave a speech in Spanish to the people of Venezuela. What did you say to them?
Well, first of all, let's see what's happening there. What's happening there is Hugo Chavez dies, leaves behind what's already kind of a disaster because he's given away all this oil to spend money through a socialist model. This new guy takes over and basically realizes he can't win an election. His party lost the elections. He lost the legislative branch. So he comes up with this idea called the Constituent Assembly. They're wiping out the National Assembly, their Congress, and replacing it with a Cuban-style government where basically there's no more direct elections of their representatives, all designed to fortify themselves in power. What this leads to, why does this matter to the United States? Number one, thousands of asylum seekers from Venezuela are already applying, the fastest growth of any country in the world. So it's placing migratory pressure on the United States. Number two, it's our values, and it's in our hemisphere. We haven't had a dictatorship emerge in this region in this way in 40 years. This is the first loss or attempted loss of a democracy since almost since the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. But third, let's play this out. So you've got Venezuela now in play with Maduro and the things they're doing. They can now destabilize Colombia because the narco traffickers in Colombia are people they've aided for a long time, important ally of the United States, and then move west. That takes you into Central America because that's where the migratory and drug trafficking pressure comes against the United States. They now threaten the governments of Honduras with a leftist candidate. They're already El Salvador is already halfway there with its current leadership. Nicaragua is already all the way there. Guatemala is on the verge of being a failed state because of the challenges it faces. All of this pushing into Mexico, who itself has a left-of-center Chavez-type figure running for president a year from now. And so you can very quickly see within 4 years, if this works in Venezuela, you could see it spread to Colombia, Honduras, Guatemala, Nicaragua, it's already there, El Salvador, and ultimately into Mexico and right to the U.S. border. So this is, you've got to think forward on a couple of these things, but these dominoes begin to fall, and suddenly we have a very unstable region where anti-Americanism and narco-trafficking are putting tremendous pressure on our country, and not to mention the migratory pressures that follow.
So you are the only U.S. senator who could have delivered that speech last night in Spanish. What was your main message to them?
Yeah, my main message is I've seen this happen before. I'm not seeking to interfere in the internal affairs of Venezuela. All we're asking for is for the government of Venezuela to follow its own constitution, hold free and fair elections, and let the people vote for whoever they want. But I also spoke to them as someone who was born and raised in a community shaped by the tragedies of this hemisphere, by the Sandinistas in Nicaragua, by the Castros in Cuba, and by the tyranny that results, that leads to corruption, which we've seen massive amounts of corruption. And so my point to them is the United States, like any sovereign country, has a right to decide who they deal with and on what terms. And we are not going to stand by and watch as this anti-American dictator consolidates himself in power, violates the rights of his people, and ultimately in the long term threatens the United States. So it was a message of solidarity and in support for what President Trump has done and what he intends to do in the days to come.
Senator, did you see the report in the Washington Post that says that there might be a change of a mission statement language at the State Department, taking out the two words, justice and democracy, so that it would maybe say something like, we promote the security, prosperity, and interests of the American people globally? Does it concern you that the State Department might be taking those words out?
It does, because I think democracy and stability and prosperity go hand in hand. Here's the bottom line. When in a country where people get to vote and choose their leaders, they're less likely to start a war, and they're more likely to be more prosperous because those leaders every 2, every 4, every 5 years have to answer to their people. This is not about left versus right. One of the things points I made last night. In Argentina, they've had presidents on the left and on the right, but they're elected. Brazil is going through a constitutional crisis right now, but it's being decided through their court system. Mexico has elections. Chile has gone left and right from one time to another. That's not the issue. The issue is when democracies don't generally start conflicts with other democracies because their people won't tolerate it. dictatorships do, because they don't have to answer to anybody.
It doesn't seem like the best time to be actually revising that mission statement in particular, but I guess we'll wait to hear from the Secretary on that. I could ask you one last question. I just talked to Karl Rove. We were talking about tax reform, and I asked him if he was an optimist or a pessimist, if it could get done. He said optimist, and I know you have a great interest in this, especially when it comes to working with Ivanka Trump on the child tax credit. Where are you, optimistic?
I am, because I think we're going to be, unlike health care, I think there is a strong consensus in the Republican Party for pro-growth tax strategies. In fact, we have to do it. A lot of this economic growth we're seeing now is because that expectation of tax reform is already built into the growth.
Right.
They are anticipating it, and that's why it's growing. If it doesn't happen, we could see the reverse effect very quickly, and we'll be to blame. So we've got to get it done, and I do believe that we need to be the pro-family party. The most important institution in society is the family. The most important job any of us have is to be a parent. It simply costs more money than it's ever cost before to raise children now in the 21st century. Our tax code should account for that. And that's why I met with Ivanka on it again today. We're going to get that done as well.
It's really important to talk about children. We talk a lot about the older population, as we should, but the children need more attention. Thank you, Senator. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.